we're talking about how Confucius says, especially what's most important, what we most want to cultivate is we want to be a junzi. What's a junzi? I said it's usually translated as gentleman. But it means the good person, the virtuous person. Don't be a tiny man. Be a virtuous person. Don't be a tiny man. Now again, he's always using masculine language. It need not be. How do you become a virtuous person? Well, a lot of it rests on that stuff I had up there. It's up there right now. The Zhangming. Those 5 relationships. Find where you are on that list and do your job. Are you a father? Be a good one. Are you a king? Be a good one. Love your people. And basically all those relationships are superior, inferior relationships. Not that the superior is better. They just have a different job than the inferior. Both sides are equally important. But what really permeates all of them, really, that you could reduce all of them to really the first relationship, father-son. It's the most basic superior-inferior relationship where there should be a mutual respect and love and understanding. There should be this concept called qiao, slightly different from, I know it looks like the same, in English, with our alphabet, same letters, different word, qiao, that's filial piety. There should be a special kind of reverence for the family. Get that right. Yeah, that's in the father-son relationship specifically, but also it should really be in the ruler-subject relationship. That should be like the father-son relationship. It might seem peculiar, but even the husband-wife relationship should be like the father-son relationship. Okay, there should be a mutual love and respect and understanding, but also a special kind of reverence. And the ancient kings, especially those first 3 kings way back in the day, they had that. And then that was lost, and that's why we find ourselves in a disordered society today. We need to order society. How? With this. Now, we need to order it, but interestingly, there's a school called legalism in China that says, yeah, you should do stuff like this. You should obey your spouse, or else you'll be punished. This should be made through law and enforced. And Confucius says, no. We should do this. This stuff is stuff that we should do, but it shouldn't be legally enforced. Because if you have to force someone to do this stuff, you've kind of lost the plot. This has to be something that's cultivated, and it has to come from an inherent desire. And that's why this will lead us into some of the virtues that we'll talk about. When we're talking about ritual, ethics, like what we should do to be a good person, I'm going to skip to this and then I'm going to go back to text. Because this answers the question, how do we do this? If not through law. You don't make it the law that, hey, I need to obey my parents. How do we do it? Cultivation of these virtues. First one, that one. Zhen. If you call it Ren, that's fine. This can be translated, it says humaneness up there, but it can mean like humanity. It's like a care for humanity. And this is really the basis. This is one of the first bases. There's going to be a couple of fundamentals here. This is fundamental number 1. There has to be a care for others. Care for humanity itself. In the sense of propriety, like why should you care for other human beings? Because it's what you ought to do. So we'll start with that. So altruistic virtue, wanting to care for others. So for example, if all those roles, every single one of them, the father, the son, the ruler, the subject, the husband, the wife, the elder, the youth, the older sibling, the younger sibling, all of those aspects involve not the individual as such, but the individual in relation to someone else. Every aspect of human being, that is being a human, has to do with our interrelation to others. So to quote the poetry of John Donne, no man is an island. No one lives in isolation. Who you are is contingent upon the relationships that you have. And not just the accidental ones. By accidental there, I mean like, oh, you happen to be friends with so-and-so. You've got parents. How do you relate to that? So it starts there. Everything that we do as human beings starts with this notion of zhen, which is caring for others. Like we all have to do it. And where this is lacking, it says society will devolve into chaos. That's why Confucius will say, if you don't get as I said last time, if you don't get the roles right, then you don't get language correct. And if language is not correct, everything devolves from there. So if our families are messed up, our society will be messed up. So if we get that right, on the other hand, then society will be right. But that's where it starts. Zhen, the notion of caring for others. But that's not all. Other ideals. Li, which means ritual itself. Ritual in what sense? Well, I already said Zhen is about caring for others. Li is about caring for society in this way, in a matter of propriety. Part of the reason why we mess up those relationships is a lack of proper behavior and etiquette. Why is filial piety lacking? Why do people not treat their parents with the kind of dignity they ought? From even just little tiny behaviors that we don't get right. Every single act that we perform, and our actions are really a performance, always. Every single action that we perform ought to be in the proper way. And there is a proper way to do everything. Now again, Confucius does not say this stuff should be enforced through law. This is stuff we should just do, and that will be explained by really the next notion of yi. But ritual, everything is a ritual. Now I know we think of rituals as something like cordoned off and like something special that we do in worship services or something like that. Sure it is. Everything is a ritual. That's why I mentioned last time the Chinese tea ceremony. And sometimes why is there a ceremony for tea? Because everything's a big deal. How you prepare even the smallest thing should be done in a particular kind of way. And if you have that kind of reverence for even your small actions, how you do something, you will have the proper reverence in the kinds of behavior that you employ to others. But nothing is simply adiaphora. Well, that's a Greek word that just means it doesn't matter. Nothing is. Everything matters. Everything is a kind of how you carry yourself, how you put your clothes on, how you wear them, what you do, how you walk. All that stuff, but just to kind of go like, whatever. Already, society, that's the problem right there. A complete lack of order and integrity. So again, ritual does not mean something like some specific ceremony. It means that too. But that really everything has the same kind of specialness. Sometimes in the West there's this notion of the sacred as something, well, that's only for Sundays. All right, you do that stuff, like you dress up when you go to church or something like that, but it doesn't matter elsewhere. And Confucianism is, no, treat everything that you're doing as though it's a special occasion right now. Everything, because everything is special. There's no off days. Okay, and it says, especially with regard to one's name, again, that word there, ming, especially with regard to your role. Like if you're a child, you don't get days off as a child. You're always a child. And I don't mean that in the sense of like an infant, but in the sense of being the son or daughter of someone's parents. Even assuming that your parents are deceased, there's a way that you keep their memory. So Confucius will talk about this in the Analects too. Watch how people act about talk about their father right after they're dead, 3 years after they're dead. And if they start bad-mouthing, we have a problem. So there's still that sense that you're always a child. You don't ever want to badmouth your parents. Now granted, your parents should be treating you kindly in the first place. So it's not as though you can't say, oh, my parents did this thing, they shouldn't have done that, and assuming that's true. That shouldn't have happened in the first place. Your parents should be doing what they're doing. So do your job. If you're a king, act like a king. If you're a son, act like you're a son. If you're a father, act like a father. But I'd rather go out and do stuff, and I don't really even like my family. Get it together, or else the entire civilization breaks down. Yi. Now, this is translated as justice, but it doesn't mean justice like you think. So it's not the making right or wrong. This kind of justice is an attitude. Yi. I don't like that we translate it as justice. I would, if I were going to translate it, I have that word there. I would translate it as proclivity. That as a Burrisism. I think justice comes across too strongly. I think it has too much meaning in the West. Or too much of a different meaning. So proclivity, what do I mean by proclivity? Remember, I've said already, Confucius, does he want this to be the law of the land? Like the king will pass a law, you must obey your parents. Because if you do that, people will do it, albeit begrudgingly. And we don't want anybody to do anything begrudgingly. Have you ever had that feeling before? I don't want to do this, but I got to do it. But begrudgingly, like, I don't want to do this. You shouldn't just want to begrudgingly obey your parents. Like, I guess I'll honor my father. I don't want to, but it's what we got to do. You can do all the right things there. You got it wrong. Already, you're off. Even if you do outwardly all the correct things, okay, I'm the king, I'm going to walk in the particular king kind of way that I don't really want to right now, that you're doing it wrong. You shouldn't just do the right things, you should already want to do the right things. That's what I mean by proclivity, in terms of your attitude going in. And so it's not merely the performance of duty, and also there's a satisfaction. Like, I did this right. That should come with everything we do. I did it. Not to be arrogant, but there should be a pride in us doing our job, our name, the things that we're supposed to do. We should be satisfied with that. In a sense, and when I say satisfied, I don't mean that's enough, but in the sense of, like, I feel good that I did my job. I'm honored to my family. And then also, like, even we haven't talked about the text yet. The opening line to Confucius's Ligneux, the Analects, is to learn and to practice what one has learned. To know something and then to know how to do it. Is this not satisfying? Now, is that scripture? For Confucians, yeah, no, there's not a sense of, like, inspired text or something like that. But to a Western mind, that kind of, what does that even mean? I'll say it again. To learn and to practice what one has learned. Is that not satisfying? To know how to do something properly and then to do it. That should come with a feeling of, I did it. And I feel good about it. Because not only did I do my job, I did it well, and I did it from a sense of this is what I'm supposed to do. What are the other virtues? And all these are a package deal. This is not a pick and choose. This is a package. Ji, wisdom, the ability to distinguish right and wrong in the actions of others. You worry about you, for sure. But being able to say definitively what that person did is wrong. Not going, well, it depends from your... No. To be able to make the proclamations, what this person did was wrong. Or what this person did was right. Because that's what Kongzi spends a lot of his time doing in the Analects. What this king, and sometimes it's about complex matters, but he'll say, what this king did here was wrong. What this duke did was right. I mentioned last time, there's this one duke that brags to Kongzi. And guess what? In my kingdom, in my dukedom, I have children that turn in their parents for committing petty offenses. Like something equivalent like, guess what? My dad ran a stop sign, and I called the cops. Right, there is no stop signs in ancient China, but like that kind of like little. I'm not talking about like they murdered someone and I helped them bury the body, not like that. But like crimes. Like I turned my parents in, and Kongzi says that's wrong. That kids are turning in their parents. Parents and children, that should be the first level of loyalty. If you've got children turning in their parents, the kingdom will not be right. Your dukedom will not be right. Things are out of whack. Because that should be the most basic relationship that is right, and there should be a trust there. Okay, yeah, sure, people shouldn't be committing crime, but even more importantly, children shouldn't be turning in their parents. That's wrong. That's wrong. And so Kongzi says that definitively. He doesn't say, maybe that would be wrong. It's wrong. So Ji is a moral wisdom to say, but that person did there was wrong, incorrect. It's out of accordance with the proper names. And Shin. Shin, honesty and faithfulness. The basis of all human communication is honesty and trust. In all our dealings, the English word integrity is related to the English word integer, like a whole number. Completely whole, no fractions. Don't be a fractious person. Oh, I said this, but I meant this. Honesty and integrity at all times. No deception. Be straightforward. Because politicians are constantly scheming, saying one thing. Like, I want to do this. Like, I'm sure, Your Majesty, I think this, but really I think this. Stop it. Just say what you mean. Be open and honest. All these things together constitute how a Confucian is to live their life. Zhen, Li, Yi, Zhi, and Xin. These are the main. There are other virtues, but these are the main virtues. Main virtues that we see where? In these texts. There's basically two packages. First of all, we've got this package. The Wu Jing. These are the 5 classics. Now, this is stuff that these are considered the classics of China, period. You need not be a Confucian to appreciate these books. Kongzi does, so they exist even before Confucius. These are just like the books of ancient China. So you could be a non-Confucian, you could be a Taoist. In Taoism, they appreciate these books. The Chinese Buddhists will appreciate these books. These are parts of Chinese culture. And there are an assortment of different kinds of things. Like the Xi Jing, that's the Book of Odes. You'll see Kongzi talk about, the Book of Odes. It's kind of like these poems and folk songs. It's really a bunch of songs. Okay, kind of like how the earliest Vedas are really songs or hymns. It's just the Chinese collection of ancient songs. Sometimes they're about particular gods, sometimes they're about particular events. The Book of Songs. But they're referenced by everybody in ancient China. Everybody's referring to the Odes. And usually that's how it's put in English, the Odes. Or like Kongzi will say, did you not read here in the Odes? It'll say that. It's the common frame of reference for everybody. It still gets referenced today. The Shu Jing, history of speeches. Kind of like someone might study in the West. We don't really do this often anymore, like Kikoro. Or even how some speeches are in the public consciousness. Like if I say the phrase, I have a dream, you know where it comes from. Right? These are the speeches that are in the consciousness of ancient China. The Li Ji, these are specific ceremonies they want us to perform, rituals and rites, things that you're supposed to do, how you burn the candles correctly. Now, keep in mind, Kongzi himself says, I'm not trying to invent a religion here. I'm saying that the stuff that we used to do, I'm trying to get it right. Kongzi sees himself as a consolidator. Like, I'm just trying to get things that we already do and get it done correctly. I'm not trying to invent anything new here. This book, the I Ching, probably the most famous book in China, outside of China, but also within China. What is it? It's a book of divination. What? Numbers and magic. This number represents this, good fortune, that kind of stuff, in a poetic way. And then finally, the last book that's well known, the Chu Qie, the Spring and Autumn Annuals, which is a history of this one kingdom called Lu. Like, here's what happened here in Lu, which is a province of the Jie dynasty. So they got like some poems, some speeches, some rituals, some magic, and also a history book. And these are considered the classics. This is something that everybody in China would know. It's just part of the culture, at least in the ancient world. Everybody's going to, even if they can't read, they're going to know of these. Oh, I know some odes. Maybe not the whole thing, but that's what's in the consciousness of the time. So it's still considered part of the Confucian canon, but it's also considered part of the Taoist canon. It's also part of the Buddhist canon in China. It's just part of Chinese culture. But here are the particular Confucian books. So that was the Wu Jing. This is the Xixi. And some of these books are by Kongzi, some of them are not. So I'm going to say just generally what they are, what you'll find in there. And frankly, the third one that I have there is probably the most famous that you'll come across. It's the one I quoted earlier, the Lunye, or the Analects. So what this is a series of discussions of Kongzi. Kind of like parables. It's kind of like, honestly, it reads very similar to narrative accounts like you might see in, say, the Gospels of the New Testament. Here's so-and-so. Kongzi finds himself in this situation. Here's what he says. So it's a lot of just narrative. Did Kongzi write it down? Maybe some of it. It's definitely things he said. It's also some of the followers writing it down. But it's definitely the discussions that Kongzi has. And really no particular order. They're all kind of mishmashed together. But that's where he says the first one. To learn and to practice what one has learned, is that not satisfying? He said in the Analects.
So like the early followers wrote this book too?
Yeah. So and there's really you'll see that a lot in the Chinese texts where it'll be attributed to someone. Oh, Kongzi wrote this. Maybe, but definitely followers wrote it too. And who actually wrote it? The early Confucians, we can say that. Same thing with Mengzi, and really any Chinese author. Zhuangzi, Mozi. Did they write it? Probably a good chunk of it, but then others that were followers of them wrote it too, and that's okay. It's not like, they didn't really write all of it, so it's not authentic. There's a sense in which any tradition is really like a team effort anyway. Whereas, say, in a lot of, so oftentimes in conservative biblical literary criticism, there had to be one author to this book. Moses wrote it. It was not a team effort. We see that tendency classically. So, the first one I referenced again, these are just the discussions of Kongzi. Okay, and I've quoted before, and I'll give you a flavor for what that looks like. So this is from the Lunye. All right, so this is what it looks like in English. And so I'm just going to read this as here's what this looks like. Okay, and honestly, a lot of Chinese literature looks like this. So even in other traditions, Zhuangzi in the Taoist tradition, similar kind of stuff. Like here's just a conversation happening. So let's take a look at this. And this is, I think, was it section 13? No, 12. So if you crack open the Analects to chapter 12, you get this. Yet, Yan Yuan asked about perfect virtue. Kongsi, what's perfect virtue? So he's saying, someone asked this question, hey, Kongsi. So he goes from town to town, like talking to people. What's perfect virtue? What's the stuff you're supposed to do? The master, that's Kongsi. Kongsi said, to subdue oneself and to return to propriety, the way you ought to behave. That is perfect virtue. If a man can for one day subdue himself and return to propriety, and under heaven will ascribe perfect virtue to him, that is that tian, right? That will get blessing from the universe itself. Is the practice of perfect virtue from a man himself, or is it from others? Yan Yuan said, I beg to ask the steps of that process. All right, how do you do that? You said, okay, just act in a way that's in accordance with propriety. All right, cool. How do I do that? The master replied, look not at what is contrary to propriety. Listen not to what is contrary to propriety. Speak not what is contrary to propriety. Make no movement which is contrary to propriety. Don't do things you're not supposed to do. That's just that leap. Do everything in the appropriate way. Don't look at some of the words. Don't look at what you're not supposed to look at. Don't listen to what you're not supposed to look at. Don't speak in a way that you're not supposed to speak. Don't move in a way that you're not supposed to. Yan Yuan then said, though I am deficient in intelligence and vigor, I will make it my business to practice this lesson. All right, I'm going to give that a try. Okay, I'm going to do it. To not move, not speak. I'm going to act in all the appropriate ways and not go against them. I'm going to act in accordance with propriety. Chung Kong asked about perfect virtue. The master said, it is when you go abroad, so when you're out and about, it is to behave to everyone as if you were receiving a great guest. To employ the people as if you were assisting at a great sacrifice. Not to do to others as you would not wish to be done to yourself. To have no murmuring against you in the country, and none in the family. Chung Kong said, though I am deficient in intelligence and vigor, I will make it my business to practice this lesson. All right, so the second person asking, what's it like? He says it's like this. A couple things in there. Treat everybody like they're a great guest. Do we treat people like that? Oh, hey. Act like you're welcoming the king into your house with every person that you meet. Okay, like you're assisting at a great sacrifice. How can I help? To have no murmuring against you. You know you're acting rightly if people aren't saying bad things about you, especially when you're not around. If people aren't speaking ill of you, then you must be doing something right. Sima Yu asked about perfect virtue. The master said, the man of perfect virtue is cautious and slow in his speech. Cautious and slow in his speech. Notice we've already messed up. So what did Confucius say here? Think carefully about what you say. What did this person just do? Blurted it out. What? I'm supposed to be careful? Said Niu. Is this what's meant by perfect virtue? So the master said, that's Confucius again, when a man feels the difficulty of doing, can he be other than cautious and slow in speaking? Sima Yu asked about the superior man, the junzi. What does that look like? The master said, the superior man, the junzi, has neither anxiety nor fear. I hope I do this right. None of that. Being without anxiety or fear, said Nue, does this constitute what we call the superior man? Is that's what it's all about? And notice, again, Kongsi, he's practicing what he preaches here, so to speak. Speaking very in a controlled way when this person keeps blurting out. Nue here. The master said, when internal examination discovers nothing wrong, what is there to be anxious about? What is there to fear? So if you're already going into a situation going, I'm going to do exactly what I'm supposed to do, you've got nothing to be afraid of. A Confucian is therefore never afraid. Am I going to get this right? What if I do something wrong in the ceremony? You're going to get it right because that's what you do. Sima Yu, full of anxiety, said, other men all have their brothers. I only have not. Xie said to him, there is the following saying which I have heard. Death and life have their determined appointment. Riches and honors depend upon heaven. Destiny just works things out. I've heard that said. Let the superior, this is Kongzi talking in response, let the superior man never fail reverentially to order his own conduct, and let him be respectful to others and observant of propriety. Then, all within the four seas will be his brothers. What has the superior man to do with being distressed because he has no brothers? So someone's saying, the person here is complaining, how can I do the stuff I'm supposed to do? I've got no family to help me out. When he just said the Junsi doesn't care about what circumstances he finds himself in. If he acts with the right kind of propriety, everyone's your brother. Society functions together as a whole then, if we get this stuff right. That's Kongzi's whole point. But I just read the entirety of chapter 12 there, and the Analects, to give you a feel for what it's like. So these are just the conversations, but random people coming up to Kongzi asking him questions. Hey, what about this? What's a junzi? That's the entirety of the Analects, that kind of stuff. Kongzi going from town to town, having conversations like this. Giving people advice, explaining his concepts. Like you saw the junzi, we see in there the Zhengming, the roles that we play. The junzi, qiao, filial piety, it's all in there. And it's on there in every single chapter. Sometimes it needs some unpacking to figure out exactly what's going on. And then, when we talk about Confucianism too, I'll say this and I'll move on to some other version of stuff. So what is, again, the Chinese word for Confucianism doesn't have the name Confucius in it. Okay, we got Zhixia, Xujia, Xujiao, but you can call it Tongjiao, I suppose, like the religion of Confucius, but it's not reducible to stuff that Confucius said. He's not the only Confucian thinker. And again, he himself wouldn't say, here am I, listen to what I say, I'm trying to make a new religion. He's just trying to take already existing practices and say, we should do this better. And so the three main thinkers that we see here are Kongzi, Mengzi, and Shunzi. Which is why, if I go back to those texts, the main text in the tradition, in the Zixu, you see, yeah, there's the Lunyu that we just read from. There's the Daxue, which is another more teachings of Kongzi, but here it's less of his conversations and more he's just coming out and saying, here's what you should think. There's the Zhong Yang there, which means like the two opposites coming together, which is the teachings on Zizi, on balance and harmony. This is a big deal in Confucianism as well. Balance, harmony, everything fitting together just right, just like our names. So Kongzi spent a lot of time talking about like how our roles, everything should be in place. Zizi, and another part of Confucianism is this notion that everything should be in balance. Nothing should be out of whack. Nothing should be dissonant, discordant. Everything is about orderliness. So of course, we've already talked about like our relationships and our behavior, but also even like the layout of our house. If you got laundry all over the floor, no. There's disorder there. And probably anxiety because of a lack of orderliness. So everything should be orderly, balanced, harmonious. But also the main text is Mengzi, where in the Mengzi, very similar to the Lunyu, you have Mencius, who's a Confucian thinker going around having conversations. Very similar to that of Kongzi in the Lunyu. But it need not just be the teachings of merely Confucius. You've got Mengzi or Mencius and also Shunzi as well. And really, they're all three of them are consolidators of what's already going on in China. Such that this ancient Confucian stuff, it's really difficult to distinguish this from just Chinese culture. Both in the past and today. But what does happen is this whole idea that we need to return to this stuff, the old school way of doing things, and make things orderly. I'll just say this. The Confucianism becomes like the official, even though Kongzi said this shouldn't be law, it becomes really the official policy in China during the Han Dynasty. From about 200 BCE to 200 CE, when the Han Dynasty is in power, they are Confucians. And then it becomes a matter of we, the Chinese, we are Confucians, but also some of it is enforced by law, but it becomes the dominant view. There are other views as well. There's legalism, there's Mojia, Moism, where like Master Mozi says that we shouldn't be doing this stuff, focusing on roles. It's too much balance and harmony. Like it doesn't work like that. There are other systems and critiques of it, but it becomes the dominant view by the time we get to the Han Dynasty. And thereafter, not only relegated to China, Confucianism has a huge influence in Korea, in Japan, in Southeast Asia, everywhere, and also Taoism and Buddhism as well. There's basically all these different kinds of flavors of Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism mixing together all over East Asia and all parts of Southeast Asia. So let's get into some observational stuff here. Let's show us a couple things on rituals and even how today, I've got some images in here you can look at here. So here, temple, there's these statues in China. Here's one. What did this person do to warrant having a statue? He was filled with filial piety. This is a good son. But he's not a general that wants some. Nope. This is a good son. Because that filial piety, nothing is more important in Confucianism. So, and here's some examples of Korean rituals as well in Confucianism. But what I want to do is I want to show this clip here. Two clips. One is about just everyday kind of ritual, not everyday, but how there's a certain kind of honoring in Chinese Confucianism. And then how there has been a little bit about slight Chinese history, how there's been a return to Confucianism today, and why was there a goodbye to Confucianism to begin with? So I'll mention a little bit of that, and then I'll be moving on to Taoism. So let's take a look at this. So what was that celebration about?
Teacher.
Yeah, it was Teacher Appreciation Day. Not just the giving of an apple, right? What's going on? Why? Complete veneration of Kongzi? Why? Because he was the greatest teacher who ever was. Why? Well, a couple things. We see in the Analects there in his other writings, his other collections of sayings. Who does he teach? Anyone and everyone can come to him. That's why it said that teaching without discrimination. Anybody can do this. I can talk to the king. When it comes to the Zhengming, our roles that we have, you don't need to be the king. You don't need to be anyone in particular. Anybody can do this. Anybody can be a proper Confucian. But you see, even the particular kinds of these very specific rituals going on here, everything is done with a certain sense of propriety. Even like Teacher Appreciation Day. Sounds like not a big deal. Everything's a big deal. Be careful crafting of those instruments. Be careful of the particular garments that are being worn, the things that are being said. Everything matters. So even something like a little tiny holiday, that's not even a big deal. So let me look at one more thing here, too. I mentioned that recently, I said Confucianism has made a comeback in China. Why did it have to make a comeback? Where did it go? Well, what made it go away? This guy. Who's Mao Zedong? He was the leader of the Communist Party of China that defeated the old Chinese regime and instituted communism in China. Okay, specifically Chinese communism, which is its own thing. It's not the Soviet Union. Now, communist China is still around. But communist China today is not really communist. It's kind of its own thing. You call it Chinese communism, but it's not. It's definitely not Marxism. Right? In fact, the current Communist Chinese Party is locking up Marxists. All right? They don't like the Marxists. They don't like the classical communists. So that was just another story. But what Mao Zedong hated Kongzi. Because all this stuff about balance and harmony, that prevents one from being a revolutionary. Like if you're like, everything needs to be orderly, well then you're going to keep the status quo. So Mao Zedong, the revolutionary in China, who basically started ruling China in 1949, hated Confucianism because it's the old school tradition. It prevents revolution. Everybody just says, no, balance and harmony. No, I don't want balance and harmony. I want revolution. I want to change things. And so when he took over, Like statues of Kongzi were torn down. Confucianism, all that whole don't obey your parents. Take up arms, okay, against the old school traditions. That's what you should do. But over time, that has cooled to the point where there's been a return to, like in the current ruler in China is Xi Jinping, and there's been a return to Confucianism to the point where they keep building these giant Confucian learning centers. Now, it's Confucianism that's been reappropriated in accordance with the Communist Party of China, which again is not really communist. This guy, communism, sure. Now, it's something else. I don't want to say it's definitely not completely capitalism, but there's a lot of money being made in China. But something else is going on there. But there's been a return to Confucius and a celebration of Chinese. This is part of our Chinese identity. Wasn't the case half a century ago, but it is now. So that's why I'm going to show this is now in China. So let's take a look at this one. It's the Communist Party of China that's behind this reintroduction of Kongzi in China. But you notice a couple things there. One, it's the party's behind it because they're like, listen, no one's really a hardcore communist here anymore, so we got to come up with something new and fresh. What are the people into? Ancient Chinese traditions. And you saw that person that was teaching on behalf, like, we need to get back to being moral and spiritual again. That's exactly what Kongzi was saying. Like, we need to, if we restore the old traditions, things will be right again. It'll make politicians less corrupt and things like that. We need to go back to those old traditions. So it seems very genuinely Confucian. Any questions, comments about either of those clips that we watched?
So the last video we just watched, the government built those facilities.
I mean, you notice that the cost of $185 million.
To introduce it back into...
Yes. So, because like early on, like Confucianism was something that the early communists wanted to get rid of because that's the old Chinese traditions. We don't want old Chinese traditions. We want new revolution.
So,
but now it's kind of like, people aren't really the hardcore communists anymore because no one's really into revolution right now. Okay. In fact, China now does not even like its own revolutionaries. Like, hey, we need more revolution. Shh. Stop. Okay, things are going well right now. We're making a lot of money off the Americans. Like, to knock it off. Okay. But I've already mentioned that Confucianism is really one thread in the tapestry of East Asian religions. So I'm going to move on to talking about another one here that is another thread going on, and it's not opposed to Confucianism, and in fact it comes along really at the same time, right? And it develops intertwined with Confucianism, and that's Taoism.